break time. Been doing a lot of hay type things, and some of it successful, some of it not. And it's a nice morning. Need things to dry out a little bit before I take down any more hay. And a couple weeks back we had kind of a family event. I'm not going to get into the details, but one of the things that happened was all my kids had a chance to come up here to the farm and bring their kids, my grandkids, which is kind of a special moment. And that's the genesis of this video, because I had done one like this once before, and the premise is you're going to have a bunch of people show up who may or may not have done any fishing, and you want to expose them to that as a hobby or a pastime or a sport. And being granddad, that's our job, isn't it? You know, parents do it, but sometimes the parents are so busy trying to get through life that that kind of thing is left to us. And I think what I'm going to do is show you first of all the aftermath of that, and then we're going to pick through some of the things that we did and put together a video of my experience on that and maybe some suggestions. I'm not sure if that's something I really am qualified to do, but here's the aftermath. Look at that mess. And it was what I would consider a highly successful operation, and Wal-Mart came to the rescue yet again on this particular event and provided for not a lot of money, a whole lot of fun. So I want to go through some of the bits and pieces that we acquired. And the second subject I want to get into is kind of another one that we started getting into before, but I took a left turn. And yeah, I've got some of the more sophisticated new rods and reels at my disposal, but when you come down to a place like this, catching a fish really isn't a question. It's about how many and how big. And I had to come up with something for my grandkids to learn how to use and learn how to fish with. And here's a spectrum of things that I had. This was mine. I'm going to move this along. Basically what I've done is I've taken this old reel and I started switching rods until I found one that I could actually catch a fish with, and it turned out to be this Lew's. You know, I keep coming to this brand. I'm not going to do a big plug, but over and over and over, it seems like whatever they bring to the table seems to work pretty well. My speed spins and my pro tournaments and stuff like that have all worked pretty well. And here, yet again, I found a relatively inexpensive rod to pair up with my ancient reel. And it's got a stiff enough tip to where I can set a hook, and I've been catching lots of fish with it. That's another subject, although I may run it today. So what I ended up getting was, well, another Lew's. And it was priced right. I can't remember, but it was not very expensive. And yeah, for me, the rod's a little short. The tip is maybe not quite as stiff as I would like. But for the young fellow who had never run a spinning reel before, it worked quite well. It functioned well. And I think that's really the key. I guess one of the lessons I learned over and over again, and I learned yet again on this experience, is when you have younger kids or people who don't have experience, don't get junk. Don't get junk, because it turns a learning experience into a frustrating experience. And I think that's really the theme of this. And this particular rod and reel right here, while it wasn't very expensive, I'm not sure if there's a price on it. I really didn't even take off a lot of this stuff. It worked. It worked quite well. They caught a bunch of fish. They had a lot of fun. It's a little shorter than I like, a little bit, you know, softer than I like for my own personal stuff, but it was very, very effective for my kids. So this was a win. Absolute win. And this was the Lew's brand. I guess this was a limited success. They caught fish with it, and one of the young fellows caught his first fish with it. And the under 10 crowd, the preteen crowd, were successful with this, okay? Which was the other rod and reel that got passed around. So I'm going to call this one a qualified success. And yet again, I got this here at Walmart, and I don't even know the brand name. Never seen these before. But it was on sale, and I wanted to try a push button reel in the mix. And there were smaller hands. You know, this was in the 5 to 8 year old range with grandkids, and they caught a lot of fish. They had fun. Didn't have any tangles, so didn't get too much of a frustration, but it was literally too small for the larger kids. The handle was too small and the ergonomics were too small, but it worked pretty good with the you know, the younger kids. So I'm going to call this one a qualified success, you know. And as with all fishing operations, the most important piece of the puzzle is the bait. And yet again, my little Vibrix lures were the ones that caught the most fish. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to try these things out. Let's see if we can catch any fish. I think this would work well if you had worms, but it doesn't reel fast enough for you to run spinners and things like that. I simply can't turn it fast enough. And it's small, and it's hard to transition from casting to reeling. So this one here for me is a struggle. Now with the little tiny hands, they were successful with this. And then right here, I just can't turn it fast enough. So I'm like right in the weeds the whole time. So obviously the next question is, well, it may not be adequate for me with my spinners because of the speed I have to retrieve. How about a lure where I don't have to retrieve quite as fast, like a popper or a Rapala or something like that? Let's give it a shot. See if I can operate it with a popper. I'm not sure a popper's what fish want to eat today, but so like I was saying before, with a worm and a hook and a float, this would probably be fine. My question is, with that loose line, is that eventually going to end up in a tangle? So I think what I'm going to do is give the line a little bit of tension between my two fingers. So the answer is, yeah, I can operate this with a popper or a bait that requires slow retrieval. It's just the spinner baits that I use typically I can't use this on. So now my kids all caught fish with this. We use worms with a sinker and a float. You know, that worked pretty good for them. Check it out. Yet again, it's the bait. So this little goofy thing will catch a fish if you let it. So yeah, for little kids, maybe. For an adult or a teenager, no, I don't think this is a good option. But it didn't fail. There was no tangles or things like that. The smaller ergonomics, they do work for tiny hands. So for the first fishing rod for 5, 6, 7-year-old, maybe 8-year-old, I would say, yeah, maybe this works. All right, we're going to switch to the Lew's and the Speed Stick. Hank Parker or something like that, I can't read it. And I had good luck with this. All 3 young fellows who used it had success catching fish, number 1, but there was no failures. And like a modern spinning reel, I can flip the bail closed versus having to turn the reel to have it closed. Like have to be done with my old vintage reels, where you actually have to turn the handle to get the bail to close. This one here, I can just flip it closed with my finger, which is an advantage. I believe, and we're going to find out, but I believe it's has a fast enough retrieval rate where I can run my favorite spinners. So let's just see if that works. Here's fish. A minnow. Let's fish. Here's your first fish, and I credit that to the rod and reel combination because I could actually run the lure. Oh, there he goes. I could actually run the lure fast enough to stay out of the weeds. Here's another one. Now again, with these lures that I've kind of debarbed, there has to be enough stiffness in the rod to first set the hook, but also keep pressure on it so it stays in the fish's face while I reel it in. So this rod here and this reel is just enough, and because it had enough stiffness in the spine, those fish biting onto that little lure, the hook actually penetrated and set. And since the reel is fast enough, I can keep the lure out of the weeds. So the two big issues I have for fishing this pond with spinner baits, I was able to accomplish with this lose. And yeah, I'm kind of finicky with my reels, and I prefer my higher end reels, but this is obviously an effective tool for fishing down here. It was proven with my kids, grandkids, so this is an absolute win, and I think you can see why. The reel has survived two of my grandkids and one of my kids without any tangles and problems, so the line that was delivered on this was good enough for the job. So yeah, this has been a win. And finally, I'm going to try for the first time for me one of these Shimano Sienna packages. The rod has a stiffness which is more characteristic of what I'm used to seeing, and it's got the ceramic guides, so that should last a long time. Now the guides are big enough for me to see, and there's 6 of them, and I'm guessing it's a graphite rod. I should look at all the different paraphernalia they send with it, but the feel of it is pretty nice so far. You know, that's my first impression. Of course, I've said for years that half of lure design and rod and reel design is the buyer, not the fish. One thing I find a little goofy is that little lever right here, and it took me a second to figure that out. You see how that little kink is right there? This is what the Lew's has, and of course my Lew's personal rod is similar to this one right here. But this one, I love the retrieval speed, and I love the smoothness. Interestingly enough, if you read that, it says the retrieval gear ratio is 6.2 to 1. Plus it's very smooth. So I wish they'd get that right, because I would definitely pick that reel over this one based on the retrieval rate alone, plus how smooth it is. But because of that, even though it's a better reel, possibly rod, I'd probably select this one if someone just had them laying out in the truck and saying, which one do you want to run? So, but I cannot argue that that's probably a better quality reel for a person who doesn't care about the ergonomics of that reel stock right there, the mounting stock. Nice product, and Shimano does that. Fit and finish is nice. This one here, you know, it works, but the shorter rod for the less serious fisher person, that works. You know, the steel or stainless steel guides, I don't know. Do they wear better than the ceramics? I don't know. So my camera runs out of batteries like usual. But kind of an interesting addendum between that Shimano Sienna and this one right here. I would pick this one, absolutely. I'll tell you why. Even though it's a shorter rod and it's ostensibly lower quality being a 2-piece, And even though I don't have the guides lined up well, let me try to do a little bit better job of that. But I still can get the distance I need for casting to catch fish in this pond. And see, that's the difference. I've caught fish today on this rod and reel combination, probably 2 to 1 more than on the Shimano, and partly it's because I'm getting that extra 6 feet, 7 feet distance in cast where I'm getting out there where I know they are. So it's a case where the rod and reel actually does either increase or decrease your ability to catch a fish just based on its casting performance. And this one just casts better. It's a better balanced rod and reel. I don't know what the brand string is, and it's a light rod versus a medium and all that, but still it's a better balanced combination for me, so I would pick this one. Now, to say some good things about the Shimano, I really do like that reel. I like the higher retrieve speed. I mean, that alone, the feel of it is as well. It has a more solid feel and it's smooth. So it's not like it's all bad, but I think that reel deserves a chance. The kids didn't try it, but I tried it, and it just simply wasn't casting well. And plus the shape of the perch right there was getting into my knuckle. And so I didn't know if it was the line or the rod or the reel or what it was. I moved that reel to this particular rod and instantly picked up a few feet of casting distance. So this reel and the rod it came onto obviously didn't match, you know. So I went and put my vintage reel on it, and this thing's a casting fool. So for whatever reason, this reel and that rod works. So I guess this reel has found a new home because it casts better on this rod than it did the Lew's that I had bought for it. And I put the Shimano in the Lew's and caught a bunch of fish because now I could reach out where they were. There's a shelf out there where they all kind of hang out. But I still think it's held back by the line. You can hear the line going through the guides. It's pretty rough. But at least it got into the same area where the fish are that I could with the other two combinations. Of course, I didn't have to do anything to lose. Now, as much as I may not like that, the feel of this reel is solid and has a faster retrieval rate. The little switch down here for backlash is, I don't know, it's a little goofy, but it works. The fit and finish of the Shimano was better, I think. Even though this worked just as well, this one had a different feel to it. It felt a little more robust. Whether it is or not doesn't matter, you know what I'm saying, at that price point. But I think if I put good line on this reel right here, this Shimano Sienna, on this rod, it's going to be a casting fool. I think it'll cast quite well, and it'll be a very useful rod and reel combination for me. So I think that's what I'm going to do. I got to do something down here. I might die grind the edge there or something like that so it doesn't bite into my finger quite as much. The lights. Of course, I can't forget Zebcos. I bought a couple of Zebcos for the kids. They went home with them, and they were successful, but they always are. Maybe I'll put a little snapshot of those in here. You can't not think about using the Zebcos when you have the grandkids around. That's one of the classic and most useful concepts for starting a person fishing that has ever been invented. And yet again, I've used them multiple times. So that's the fish that got caught by no bait. You know what he's doing? He's biting at that sinker. Yeah. When you just put a hook through that fish and throw it back out and go for the bigger fish? You can do that. It's definitely an option. So how many casts did it take you to get that fish with that rod, with that lure? This rod, this high quality, high end equipment, 1. So more addendums. I put my Daiwa antique reel on that Shimano Sienna fishing rod, and that combination works pretty well for me. I've been running it now for a couple of days. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take a few casts with this lure right here, see if I can catch anything. And then I've got the Shimano reel on a loose rod, and actually that worked pretty well. I tried that. I might have some video in there for you. And that combination worked better. It's interesting how this reel with that string works better on the Sienna rod than the Sienna reel did with the string that came on it. So anyway, a couple casts, see what happens. Yet again, the reason why this fishing rod and reel are working is because it casts far enough out to where I can get to the little fish. What this is that Shimano Sienna, and here's the rod that it came in on. And this reel right here with the line it has actually casts a lot better on this rod than the Sienna did. I don't know why, it doesn't make any sense to me, but it does. Conversely, I had the Daiwa on this rod for a while, and the Sienna works as well, if not better, than the Daiwa does. Plus it's a modern reel with, you know, the anti-reverse and snapping the bail shut and very smooth operation and stuff like that. So this actually now has turned into, I think, a useful rig because it's a little shorter. So if I'm in trees and stuff like that where I don't really need the length, it works. What can I tell you? It works. I didn't think it would because of how small that guide is, but it does. So let me put the camera on and get a couple of shots of this one right here. This one here proved its point. I caught, what, 3 fish in about 5 minutes. And partly because it cast like a crazy thing. And get a lot more distance out of that rod and reel combo than I did out of the Sienna as it was delivered. Now what I've done is I put on 6-pound test. I put on the Berkley soft cast stuff, you know, with the softer line, and it seems to perform better, you know, at least here. So I love the speed. I mean, the reel really cranks pretty quickly. If you look out there, you see that weed patch out there. I got to get to the right hand side towards the end, and if I can get that distance, I'll catch fish. They're out there pretty much all the time. There's actually a hole out there. I need to be able to cast that far, and the way the Sienna package was with this particular rod and that reel and the line that was on there, you couldn't do it. And it's worth hammering that point because that loose package was better balanced. Oftentimes a person's just not going to think about that. That even though it was less dollars, it was a better balanced package, therefore performed better. And it was simply because of the line and the rod and how it interacted with the reel. And that's something that's really subtle. I'm going to run the spinner and see if I can replicate what I did with the Daiwa and the rod that the Sienna originally came with. Well, I didn't catch any fish, and it doesn't quite get as far as the Daiwa with the Sienna rod. So again, I'm not getting the same kind of cast distance. Now the Daiwa on this rod got the same distance, so something about the Daiwa reel lets it cast better than the Sienna on this particular rod. Now conversely, when I had the popper, which had a little bit more weight, this rod and reel combination performed very, very well. So while I'm not getting that extra 5 feet, which means I'm not catching any fish, it's not like grossly out of whack as it was delivered with the other line. So I'm going to change up lures, go a little bit heavier, and see if I can use the extra stiffness to get a little further out into the pond. That's a lot of lure to cast with a little rig like this. So if it goes sailing off into the parts unknown, don't be surprised. But that's a real McCoy. See, I used to get those a little bit smaller in Alabama, and I used to catch lots and lots of fish. So we're going to see if I can cast this huge lure. So while it was able to manage that huge lure with 6-pound test line, that's not the smartest move. I'm just going to lose it. So I'm going to find something about half that. Something in between. I guess the point here is the different rod and reel combination will toss different weight lures, one better than the other. So that's another whole subject. You know, sizing the lure to the rod and reel combination to get the best casting performance. A float, sinker, hook, and a worm, pretty much all the rod and reels that we looked at to this point in time can do that. And I'm still working on this to come up with what it likes to do, where I can actually catch a fish in this pond. Alright, we got rid of that outlandishly huge real McCoy. Let's go to a single spinner with a little bit of enhancement on it. And I got to see if I can get out to that weed patch, because if I can't get out that far, I'm wasting time. And see if this rod and reel can get me there. And that's the mission. Alright, in the bigger lure gets a bigger fish department, I got hooked onto a pretty good one. Let's see if I can get this down. And get some video of him coming in. This is with the Shimano Sienna. Come on, buddy. Nice fish. Come on. This guy. So he's as long as my forearm. And I caught that one on with this goofy rig right here. Let me see if I can get him back in the water quickly. Boy, he went off like a shot, so he's good. Look at this goofy thing I put on here. I don't know why they work, but they do. So, there you go. Sienna reel with the right string on a rod that complements it and is capable of handling the lures in a pond like this, ends up catching a fish. Very nice. I think that's enough for a video today. Well, it's getting a little bit later, and while I had, I guess, a fairly successful run with that overly heavy weight, and I was able to toss it with this rod and reel, this one is borderline heavy for me for this rod and reel, but I'm going to give it a shot anyway. So this is lighter yet than the one I just was using. And I probably ought to come back in about a half hour because I've already exercised the fish. But I just want to see how the casting performance is, because I think I'm beginning to find the sweet spot for this rod and reel combination, and I like it. Took me a while. It's not as good with the light lures as my other combinations are, but these a little bit heavier lures, it does a pretty good job of tossing them. And still, the way that reel operates, it's nice and smooth. And to me, the benchmark is getting out to that weed patch right there. I said it a couple times, like I did this last time. If I can get out there or to the other side of this one over here, that's a successful casting performance. So let's see what happens with this guy. Well, I better call it a night. I got a fish. Son of a gun. Huh. Stuck in the weeds, but it's a fish. Alright. Get this guy out of here if I can. So yet again, this rod and reel was performed. I casted it right into the weeds, and it was on top of the weeds, and the fish went for the lure through the weeds. Figure that one out. I had to pull the whole mess of fish and weeds. So this Lew's rod, Laser HS Speed Stick, 6-foot, power, medium light, action fast, 4 to 10 pound, lure weight 1/16 to 1/4 ounce, 4 to 10 pound, lure weight 1/16 to 1/4 ounce, 4 to 10 pound, lure weight 1/16 to 1/4 ounce. The part number is LHS60MLS. This thing works really good with this this Sienna reel with a medium weight lure. It really does. I'm having fun with it. You see that? This thing just simply casts well. So that's the sweet spot for this combination. And this one has just, I think, found a purpose in my truck. So, Didn't start that way. I mean, I started a little bit upset with the reel and the rod combination, but match that reel with the right rod, this thing is really pretty nice.